Can we start without Mark and without David?
This is the new Mark.
Oh,
I will,
okay, Mark.
I will introduce everybody
Hi,
once we get there. And we are live, so start.
Can we start without, oh God, is that what I sound like? I didn't know I was gonna be thrown into the chair role, so I wasn't prepared for this. I do know that we approved last month's minutes,
So first, we're gonna start with
attendance, sorry.
and
Oh, yeah,
then the
everybody
meeting
said-
order.
Yeah. This isn't gonna go well for the next 6 months. Do I say we call this meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll do attendance. We'll start with you, Mark.
Hi, I'm David Garrettson, I'm an assistant city attorney and got a lateral extension.
Okay, good. Welcome.
Thanks.
Everyone, Cameron here.
Kara Hilsinger. Valerie Harris. Richard Coppage.
I'm David Leedy.
Debbie Lockhart.
Palance. Scott Archer.
Bridget Escudero, city librarian.
Matt
And then-
Jobson.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Our guest, do you want to, or do we do that?
That's during featuring comments.
Okay. David, when you're ready.
Oh,
Great. We're at approving the minutes.
You're
I
great
think.
job. Yes.
I'm gonna need a printout of what to say.
No worries. Well, thank you, everybody. Apologize for being late, being at 2 places at once, so. Appreciate that. We're in approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments or changes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I will abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Please, there'll be noted for the minutes. Great, thank you. Next is, do we have a teen advisory report?
We do.
You don't look like.
Rude.
It was.
No offense. No offense. My last name, no.
This is written up by Christy Kemper Hodge, and she said that the Tabard Teen Advisory Board has been hard at work on several large projects, as well as preparing for the murder mystery party that is preventing us from attending this month's meeting, which happened just this afternoon. Some of their projects have been to add a teen resource board, summer reading promotional video, and having a teen art fan exhibit. They have identified their top priority resources, including one on a new board. They've identified which organizations they're going to reach out for more information, and each tab member will be developing a flyer templates for this project. The next step of the summer reading video is to film it, and the deadline for the wrapping up of this project will be early May, so there will be time to share the video out to the community before summer reading begins in June. Also in June will be a teen artist exhibit where teens can register and submit a display of 2D or 3D art based on their favorite books. This exhibit will be on display floor 1 of the library of the summer reading break starts. Tab members have been developing the art guidelines, registration for the library's summer form of infrastructure, and then pulling events together in just a few months. Additionally, and in preparation for summer, TAM is providing a valuable insight into plans for teen summer events, prizes, and they've got a lot of things coming up, an incredible year to start coming into together.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the report? I should actually step back a moment. We do have some public comments.
We do have several.
So why don't we go ahead and take the public comment now?
First public comment is Jim Shepke on the Kaiser Community Library petition paper. You should have received that via email prior to this meeting.
I actually brought.
And he brought it to us. Yep.
Thank you.
I think there's something in our packet. Yes.
There's actually something added.
Okay,
I made 15 copies.
Oh, that's.
I might as well.
we'll
give
hand
that.
them out.
do you want me to be?
Wherever you feel most comfortable.
Stand up, sit down. It has. Yeah. Okay, I'm Jim Shefke, and I've been to lab recently. And I'm working very hard on the livability levy. I want you to know that. We tabled at this library last Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We got 147 people say they will endorse the levy. We got 27 lawn signs ordered. It's going great. We're going to do it every Saturday until the election from 10 to 4. So come see us. We're having fun. There's nothing like tabling at the library. It's a blast because everybody's so happy, so friendly. They love the library. They love us. And it's just a wonderful thing to do. But what I'm here to talk about today is the fact that Kaiser on February 18th passed a resolution to establish a city library. And you're going to hear about that. I won't go into detail about that because I think you'll hear about that from BJ. But I have great concerns about it, frankly. And I was a state librarian for 20 years. I worked at the state library for 25 years. I tried again and again and again to get Kaiser to form a public library. And I think the way they're going about it right now is not satisfactory. And the reason I really care about it is that I think it has the potential to do harm to this library, which is my library, which I care a lot about, and which I'm going to get a majority to vote for on May 20th. So we can keep going here. So I have this paper that I've written. It's a position paper. It's very detailed, and all I would do is ask you to read it. And then if you'd like to invite me back sometime to talk about it, I'd be happy to do that. But my only reason for being here today is to ask that you carefully read this, carefully consider it. I would put it on a future lab meeting for discussion, and I would invite me back. But you can do what you want, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Are there any questions for Jim? Well, Jim, I did want to say thank you so much for all your advocacy and support of the library. In your former job as state library librarian, and all your efforts now. So thank you very much.
Last night we got the Salem Kaiser School Board to endorse the livability levy at their regular meeting. And it was very good, and the comments were terrific, including they have a student advisor on the board, and they had one named Sonia. She was amazing. She's a high school student. And she talked about how she grew up in this library and how, it really has made all the difference for her in her education. So anyway, it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I had a quick question.
Okay.
What's the timeline?
Okay, I met with the state librarian today, as a matter of fact. And the information from the city of Kaiser has gone to the state library. Now it's their decision as to whether to give recognition under the Oregon revised administrative rules for that. So they'll be making that decision sometime. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do, but it was in the form of a written paper, so I'll go ahead and pass it out. It looks a bit, I don't know if you want to read it now or wait till. Oh. Want to take some time to read it, and then we do have them in the room if you want to ask any questions.
Come back.
Yeah.
David, and can we do the stuff that we have on the agenda, and then I'd like more time to digest.
Okay.
And I don't want to sit and read it.
Yeah.
If we get to it.
Thank you.
Bridget, will you let me know if it would be advisable for us to return to a future?
Sure.
We'll, you know, thanks
Thank
so
you for
much.
providing that for us.
Yeah.
Chair's report, well, as I think Jim mentioned, there's a lot going on. As many of you know, there is the city council voted 2 weeks ago to put on the May ballot a livability levy, community livability levy, which will cover Parks and Rec, libraries, and Center 50+. And so that's going to be on the ballot in the 20th, is that right? Yeah, May 20th of May. So there is a currently an organization, PAC, that's been formed to help raise awareness of the campaign and of its efforts. In addition to that, the city has posted on their website information about the levy, and it's a lot of its issues. I know we've got Scott on the agenda for later, and we can talk a little bit more about that. I think that's all for my report now, and be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Great, hearing none. Bridget, we'll kick it over to you.
Attached, you'll find this last month's city librarian report, if there's anything that you have questions about, or anything at all. We had a very busy month. We had the legislative day at the state library, which we talked to a couple of representatives. That was really nice. And then Salem Raids included. We had a very successful Salem Raids. A lot more people who were attending the programming, which was really great. And it sounds like everybody, there's a few negative comments about the book, but the majority enjoyed the book. So those were a couple of highlights.
Just one question, the legislators that you met with, have any of them come to the building yet?
They have not. So during the state library legislative day, we have certain topics that they want us to talk about, but we did approach, support for the Salem payment in lieu of taxes and how that would help the library, because that would then free up some money through the general fund, and just talking about how great the libraries are to support them.
This is a great report. Thank you. It's ready to alert. So, any other questions for city staff?
I do. The meeting before this, or 2 meetings before, you said something about a tour of the library, and it was gonna be when I was gonna be gone. And I would love to go on that and learn more about how the library works. Do you do that every so often, or how often are they scheduled?
They are not. So we've only been doing them for like for state representatives, or just recently the city council and mayors. So I'd be happy to take you all on a tour. We would just need to make sure it's public notice, because if everybody comes, then it's a quorum. But it's not an issue if we do like a special, and then we would have to come in a little early or stay a little late, because it's gonna take at least 30 minutes to 45, depending how deep you guys want to get into the back.
And a follow-up question then, because I feel like the more people know about this wonderful library, the more better chances we have of passing that levy. Would it be possible to have a public, invite public to come for a tour and show them all the background and all the stuff that's done? And I don't know how you get the word out, but I just feel like.
Talk to your friends, talk to people,
Oh,
talk to naysayers.
Well, I
I'm
talk to
bringing 2
everybody.
naysayers.
Okay.
On my own, I
Okay.
did it separately.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give them a tour.
Okay, well, I think there's so many people that I've met that don't even have library cards.
Bingo.
And I just think, I know they're doing the outreach here in front of the library, but you're kind of preaching to the choir here.
Right.
I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like maybe if they let us go in front of grocery stores and just reach out to the public, they just don't know. And I know I'm on the agenda later, but I mean, this is all part of that, because it's like, today, I've come in before and I've seen, I think this is a wonderful idea. cake pans, those fancy cake pans that you use once for your children's birthdays, and then you have them in your cabinet taking up room, and they're never used again unless you know somebody you can give them to. Well, and they've got, and so today, and then every time I come in, there's something different. So I walked over today and I saw the notebook. Oh my gosh, it is wonderful, the stuff people can get, and nobody knows. And I looked today on the website, I didn't see anything anywhere that said they did that. When I go, where I check out my books, do I want DVDs, and I go there, well, it didn't say, underneath that, it didn't say tools, cake pans, puzzles,
Yeah.
toys, it didn't have any of that, so nobody knows unless they come in. So I think, if we could somehow get the word out, and a tour would be a great way to do that.
So we used to do group tours, especially during library week, but because of staff capacity,
Yeah.
because we used to limit it to, I think, like 20 people. And from what I gathered, it was like an all day, like scheduled thing. So we just don't have the staffing to do that anymore. However, we are planning to do a video tour.
Okay,
So that's coming up in April. So the second week of April is library week. So that's how we're planning to implement all these, like Love Your Library campaign, show us your stack, which is showing what you checked out with a little backdrop. So we have all of these things planned to promote all of the wonderful things that we have here.
So the notebook with all the stuff, is that gonna be in the video too?
Library of Things, marketing will be there.
Wonderful, oh, I'm so glad, good,
Isn't
good.
it listed on the website?
It is under collections or things, more about your
Not
library.
under, yeah,
Okay.
it's not under the books, but it is listed on.
It says library collections, and I almost clicked on that to see what would happen, but,
Yeah,
okay, that's what it
Yep.
is? Okay, yeah, maybe we can give it a name that's a little more explanatory. Okay,
Great ideas, great suggestion.
thank you.
Thank you. So we have a friends report?
I reached out to Nicole because I wasn't able to read the meeting last month and asked her if there was anything she wanted me to share. Just, the book sales are coming up and their work.
Okay, the next one's in April or in May?
Next week,
Yeah,
next
Well,
week or this Thursday, actually.
Is it a pop-up one? It's a regular one.
Oh, you're talking about the book sale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that won't be until, man, I want to say it's not till June, actually.
Was it Jill June?
Yeah. But I can follow up on that.
And I don't think we have a public library foundation report. I think Dana said she didn't have anything at this point. I know they're actively working on, they're kind of the lead funder for the livability campaign, so that they're doing a lot of work on that. Any other questions? Well, as many of you know, this is my last formal meeting as chair of the Library Advisory Board. I have been on the advisory board now, I guess. It is a delight to work with all of you. I cannot tell you, Bridget, how impressed I am with your staff and the level of dedication that they give to the library. Come in here any day, anytime, and doesn't matter what's going on. The face of the library is out there, and they're providing wonderful resources to the community. And I come here with my second cousin who's 4 years old, and he walks to the building, and enjoyed walking through the kids section, and it is just a delight. And as you talk about all the different resources, it's not just checking out books, there's just all different resources here. And so thank you, Bridget, to you and your team. And then thanks to everybody here. It's time and effort to come on a monthly basis to talk about things that are important to us. We're here because we love the library, and I appreciate all of you and all of your efforts. And I won't be far away. I'll still be working on library things at least for the next few months, but thank you all for all of your efforts. I greatly appreciate it. So with my resignation, which will be effective the 25th, it's got
Remember what the date was that we specified?
sometime before the 24th. I will be resigning, but in the meantime, we need to have elections, or at least an acting chair. So, that acting chair would be in place for the next few months until we have our elections again. Once things get stabilized here. So, do I have a motion for an acting chair?
I move that we get an acting chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll open up the nominations. Are there any?
Yes,
Okay,
Yeah.
I would like to nominate Ms. Fowler.
Valerie, would you accept the nomination? You don't have a choice.
Yes,
So, thank you, Valerie.
unless somebody else wants.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I would state that the nominations are closed. So all those in favor? All those in favor of Valerie as our new acting chair signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Let's come back. Save this one.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll finish things up here.
Yeah, please.
Debbie, you want to talk about public outreach?
Well, I kind of already did. I mean, I pretty much said everything I wanted to say. I was talking about the wonderful resources here, so I don't really have anything else to do.
Yeah, I would add that as part of the process of doing a lot of outreach for the campaign. And if you look at some of the statistics by Bridget, there are parts of town that don't feel the impact of the library. And we heard that from people that testify, we heard that from city council people. So, and that's something that we're working with. So when you're talking about doing some outreach, I know the long-term vision for the library is to have more branches. Resources have to be there, because that was what was approved by the public 2 years ago. But the resources have to be there, at least for staffing. But particularly like West Salem, for example, there were some questions about kind of the services that are provided out there. So, as you're kind of looking at a outreach strategy, maybe doing some pop-up activities and other, working with partners in other parts of town to do some pop-up activities might be a benefit.
And what sort of thing do you have in mind when you're talking about a pop-up activity?
For example, and again, it's based on staffing, but maybe partner with Center 50 at doing maybe on a afternoon during the week or on a weekend, possibly on a Saturday, possibly having some materials there. Obviously, you have to figure out how to fund it, but there may be some kind of partnerships that are some potential there. I know I've talked to Center 50 about possibly being a host for the Friends of the Library. They do something. So maybe some kind of partnerships that you can look at.
I was thinking, when I was thinking about all this too, I was thinking about how to get the word out to people, to tell them everything that we have. And yes, we do have the internet, but when I worked for Kaiser, sometimes when we had something we wanted to get out to the public, we added a little flyer to their water bill. And I was thinking maybe if we could, I don't know if we can do that before the election, if that would be appropriate, if we have to wait till after or what, but if we could put out just a little flyer that's just a third of a page, so it would just be the same size envelope, wouldn't have to be folded or anything, with something like, did you know that at your library you can get, and then list all those things, and that there's, as much as we could fit on there, we could do it two-sided. And then granted, I know some people, they won't even look at it, but some people might, and that is one way to get the word out that we know would go to everybody who gets a utility bill.
That's a great idea, get a water bill. I mean, I think that might be something that we could get Friends of the Foundation to underwrite.
Oh, wow.
But I think the timing is, you
Yeah.
can't do it now, but maybe
Okay.
something.
They just changed the water billing system.
It's true.
Yes, I
know.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how it's going, but.
Well, I
There
like
was
the
some-
water bill. I like it. I think.
Well, I
it's
changed
very
the account, so I don't get any, I don't get any of the little flyers, so.
Right.
But that may be something down the road to
Yeah.
Okay.
kind of take a
Yeah.
look at.
From what I've heard, it's not the library that's in question. Like, people, for the most part, support the library. It's the fact that we're partnered with the parks.
Really?
Yeah, because everything I read or heard from people, and stop me if I'm not allowed to say this at this meeting, is great, now it's going to clean up the parks, you know, homeless, and it's so like,
Oh,
we
interesting.
wish that it was just the library, which is kind of something that we had talked about. Cause Center 50 is its own little need of
Right.
people, but people are like, I don't want to fund this because it's just going to clean up the parks.
Right, yeah.
So if it doesn't go through, which I'm hoping it does, obviously, and the next round, could we look at potentially just doing a livability just for the library?
Well, that makes sense because I thought of that when I read what they had on the levy and I saw the Center 50 and then I saw the park and I thought, hey, you know, there's a lot of people who don't have kids that don't use the parks or that they're only used 3 months out of the year.
Right.
And the library is year round and it reaches every bit of the population.
Right.
So I get that. Cause I wondered, I thought, yeah, this is kind of conglomerate here. Really, different people who benefit.
Well, I think what the parks are saying is like, if we don't do it now, we're gonna have to do it triple
Right.
in a couple
Yeah.
of years.
Yes.
So
and I
whatever,
understand. Yeah.
whatever goes down the tube in the meantime,
Right.
we're gonna have to put money into it later.
Well, I know in Kaiser, they didn't go to the voters. Their council just implemented a park fee that was added to their utility bill. It was only like, they do their water bills every other month and it was like $6 for the 2 months. So it's $3 per household per month for the parks and it made a huge difference. I mean, they were able, they had a lot of bad, of play structures that had gotten dangerous. They had to just take them down. It didn't have anything. They have new play structures there. It's really benefit, but it is also, it only goes in the parks, which I think that's important to the voters to know where their money is going to
Yes,
go.
for sure.
So I think that's something we need to consider too.
And we would love updated play structures, right?
I know.
But I think so much of it goes to cleaning up
Yeah,
after the homeless, and so.
I know, yeah.
or
David, what
shelters,
was
and
the
so-
thinking in going this route, having kind of a conglomerate on the ballot?
Appreciate your comments. You know, when you create something like this, it's not always easy and you have to balance out lots of different priorities and perspectives. It is my opinion that this would not have gotten on the ballot if it had just been solar libraries. We needed to bring in partners from different groups that had different interests. So, and they bring their own constituency and their own perspective. And the success of getting it on the ballot was the fact that we could show city council and city staff that we represented a diverse group, that we're willing to put our own resources into this, our own efforts into this to make this happen. And getting back, I think, to Debbie's point is that part of the attractiveness of this, and then I'm going to turn over to Scott. Part of the attractiveness of this is that if this passes, the city council has put this money aside in a separate box. So you can see how this money is being spent. So, you know, if the voters don't like how this money is being spent, it's not going to go in this big bucket of general funds. You can kind of see how these funds are, and over the next 5 years, how these funds are appropriated. And if you're not happy with how they're funded, then 5 years goes away, that it's done.
Right.
It is a different way of funding city services here, because it's going to be dedicated specifically for those three entities and those three programs and services. So it is different. I think the longer term goal is, if this is successful, to look at and speaking for myself, looking for a kind of a library district or a community service district that can kind of fund this on a long time. That takes some effort to put together.
Yes.
Lots of effort. And so this is our first step towards saying, hey, can we put this together? The other point that I think is important for the library board to know is that if you look at library funding over the last 20 years, kind of like this.
Yeah.
And demand is kind of like this. Mm-hmm. So one of the attractive things for what's being proposed by the livability levy is we can guarantee Bridget and her team 5 years of stable funding. So they'll know 5 years of stable funding with a slight increase that we hope will be used towards additional services on the weekend and additional evening services. But we'll provide the library at least with some stable funding that they can kind of plan for the future and kind of start that momentum to kind of meet some more of the demand of the library team. So I hope that answers kind of your questions. It's not perfect for everybody.
Sure.
But I think that's the process that we went through, and I think it is a good proposal for the city. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, David. And I do have a slideshow to pull up here. We'll share it for those online. And Bridget, I guess I'll have to ask you to
Yeah.
go
1
through the
second. while
slides for me.
I go To my.
Is that a new branch library?
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
I do too.
All right, so, let me know when you want me to advance.
Yeah. Well, hello, everyone. Scott Archer. I'm Deputy City Manager for Community Services with the City of Salem. And I want to just share a presentation that we have. This is a similar presentation that is being presented around to various city boards, committees, commissions, and also neighborhood associations and chambers of commerce and lots of other organizations. So you can go ahead and advance. So I feel like I'm going to give you the abbreviated version of this because I know that you all have a good amount of knowledge about this. You've been talking about it at your meetings and so forth, but I'll still run through this quickly and then pause or hit me with questions at the end. But so we're talking about the levy that the council has referred to the voters. It will be on the May 20th ballot. It is 98 cents per thousand of assessed value, and it is dedicated solely to fund the levels of service that we have now for Parks and Recreation, Library, and Center 50 Plus. And it also restores some of the hours that we've lost over the last couple of budget cycles. So we are looking at in a library in particular. Everybody else it's gonna fund the current level of service. So it's basically a maintenance of service levy, but the library gets restoration of hours back from what we've lost for the last couple of cycles. You can go ahead and next one. The reason that we're talking about this, and this will get to the question or the conversation that just happened, and I appreciated hearing that perspective about why are we doing this with other services, and I'll talk a little bit more to that to add to what David said, which was very, very well described, David. Thank you. So we're talking about the city's general fund. It's the fund that the property taxes go into. It's exactly as the title says. It's our general fund where revenues from different sources come in, and then that fund is what pays for all of our community services. So the library is funded through general fund, Parks and Recreation, Center 50. Many or most of our internal services like HR, and finance, and IT, and the like. And then the biggest portion of the general fund is public safety, police, and fire. It's about 60% of the general fund. So the challenge with the general fund is that all of these services compete for those same funds. When I say compete, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean they're competing interest for those dollars. They're limited dollars, and they can only go so far, which is, we've seen the results of what that means when the city council and the budget committee have to make choices and they have to choose between services or funding levels of service based on what is available. So now we have this gap, and to make it even more difficult, that reduces the amount of funding that we have to provide funding for these services. The two reasons why we're in this situation of a funding gap are Salem, along with many other cities and local governments in Oregon, are facing a similar challenge, which is because of two primary things. There are other factors, but the two primary factors are limitations within our state property tax system and how governments, local governments in Oregon receive funding, the measures that limited how much we can grow the taxation in the local government, going back to the 1990s with some measures that limited those. And then the second big reason is just generally rising costs of doing business. 80% of the money that comes out of the general fund pays for people. We're a people-driven business in the city, and the costs related to employing people are escalating higher than the amount that we can escalate the collection of property taxes. And that's some of those things are some of that is within the city's control, but a lot of it is not. So, for example, PERS, we get told from the state, this is our PERS contribution, and we will make that, and that is escalating at a very high rate right now. Costs of healthcare benefits, we're subject to labor negotiations, union negotiations with our contracts and so forth, and so. So we are kind of subject to those things that we don't have a lot of control over. You can go ahead, Bridget. We have been the city's been efforting in the last couple of budget cycles. I mean, this is an ongoing process anyway, and always looking for opportunities to save money, of course, but specifically in the last 2 fiscal years, including the one that we're in right now, we've cut $4.7 and $3.4 million consecutively. So that's well over $10 million in 2 years, and that's again general fund reductions. We also have we've also taken some measures with forming a forecast review team. So we do 5-year forecasts of the general fund and all the city funds, but the general fund specifically. And as we look at that, we have to determine how we factor that forecasting. In other words, are we being very cautious about that and kind of overestimating or underestimating our savings and where that falls. So there was a forecast review team of local community members that was formed that helped us look at how we do that forecasting, and that actually brought down the gap a little bit. We started for next year's budget, our forecast had us at closer to an $18 million deficit. There's also a recent city efficiency committee that met several times with the support of the city council that was comprised of local business and finance leaders in the community that essentially said, is the city doing a good job with its money right now? So in other words, before we go out and ask for more support, are we doing a good job with our funding? And you can go ahead, Bridget. I think the next slide is the findings. Yeah, so this committee findings that they reported back to council fairly recently were that there is at a very high level, but there's no inordinate waste that they could find. That we actually, Salem operates with fewer resources than a lot of our peer cities do. We're constantly reviewing ourselves against how other cities do business. That there are external factors that limit our ability to control costs. I just talked about that. And then that there are opportunities for some efficiencies, even though they find that there's no inordinate waste. There's always things that you can be doing to find efficiencies. You can go ahead, Bridget. And so, those recommendations are pretty high level types of concepts. They're not, like pointing to a specific thing that says, you need to go into this budget line and figure out how to save money, but it's bigger picture thing. So, they recommended, that we always are looking at opportunities to collaborate with other agencies, and we do a lot of that anyway. But, an example of that was used would be like our fire department we have a fire station on the north and east side that is very close to a Marion County fire station. And perhaps there's some efficiencies that we could work with the county on that. That was just one example of working with other governmental agencies. Leveraging our audits. So we're doing efficiency audits of basically all the city departments. We've done some of those already and we'll continue to do more. And those are providing specific recommendations that we're looking at. Exploring alternate ways to do service delivery. That's just saying, hey, you should always be thinking outside the box and being creative. And then one that is a little bit more specific is reducing employee overtime. We do have a fair amount of overtime in the city that is primarily related to public safety mandatory minimum staff. There's not a lot we can do about that. In other words, to staff the fire stations, we need this many people at a given time. If there are people out for various reasons, then we have to pay people overtime. But beyond that, there are occasional other overtime needs, and basically the committee is saying, let's look at ways that we can really limit that. So those were the recommendations from that committee. Next.
Why is use AI hiding behind?
Oh, yeah, that was
Like-
also, yeah. I think that's the
Like it's
idea.
working.
I think the graphic is that it's sort of an underlying issue. I forgot to mention that. Thanks for calling that out.
It just looks
I-
weird right there.
I buzzed right over that, but it basically is let's use AI to be efficient, not necessarily for the. We are very specifically saying we're not trying to replace people with AI, but we are trying to help support the work of the people. And we already have an AI system in place that our IT group actually built their own IT system. So we don't have to pay that monthly fee for every single user. It's a pretty cool thing, and we're really starting to roll that out. So yeah, thanks for pointing out. I missed that one. So again, we are already looking for efficiencies. And then on the right side, this is a very recent directive that essentially coming from the city manager's office to all city departments and agencies, which is for the rest of the fiscal year to do everything we can to conserve as much in our fund balance going into next year, so that gap perhaps even comes down a little bit more. We're not going to efficiency our way out of a $14 million general fund gap, but what we can do is save some of the money. So for the rest of the year, these are mandates that the city has given, and I'll just let you kind of take a quick look at those, but it's kind of typical stuff.
Are you talking, I'm sorry, are you talking fiscal year?
Fiscal year.
Starting, so, okay,
Yeah, so through June 30th.
okay.
And perhaps some of these things will roll forward, but that's kind of a mid-year budget directive, if you will. You can go ahead, thanks. So if we don't have a levy, what will happen? So as discussed a little bit earlier, the services that this is going to support, including the library, Parks and Rec, and our senior and youth, some of our youth services as well. What we do know, the budget committee has not yet convened to work through our budget. That will happen starting in April and through May. But the city manager is required to provide a draft, an initial budget, if you will, a proposed budget in early April. And that budget is almost surely going to have significant cuts in all of these areas. There is that part about public safety that I mentioned a little bit ago, and I will tell you I'm not going to be able to debate this with you this evening, but that I know that the council has a position that they are prioritizing public safety, and what they want to do is hold it as harmless as possible or as long as possible. That budget gap gets bigger and bigger each year over the 5 years. So at some point it goes very deeply into everything, including public safety. But we do know that without this levy and the draft of the proposed budget will be as if we have no new revenue. So this is going to be an interesting piece too. I'll mention that there are going to be 2 tracks happening at the same time, but it happens that the timing is really good. And that is, we have to work through our budget process. The council has to adopt a budget by June 30th for the next year, starting July 1. That process begins in early April. The election isn't until May 20th. The budget committee will have received a draft budget. They will go through it and make their own recommendations, and they will complete a recommendation of a draft budget that goes to the council by the time that the election for that actually. So for several weeks before the election. What I'm getting at is that while I can't tell you exactly like how many dollars are going to be reduced from each one, that all hasn't been quite completed yet. We're working through that right now. It will be very publicly visible by the time we get to the election, and in fact, well before that. I'm sure there will be lots of
Before ballots are mailed.
very much so. It'll be headline news out of the gate on April 16th is the first budget meeting, and it will say draft budget reduces these services, and it will probably we'll speak more specifically to what those reductions look like.
Can we get with the cuts to senior service? I know that's 13 plus. What are youth services? Is that recreational activities?
Yeah, that's just kind of a general reference to some of that. Yeah, and it's primarily that would be more
They'll
appropriately
follow
to say
checkers.
senior services or center 50.
Nick?
Yeah, go ahead. I had another thought that'll come back to me in a moment here, but so what is the levy? What is the investment? It's 98 cents per thousand of assessed value. That is, again, assessed value on property in Oregon with our interesting tax system is not the same as your market value. So if you look at your Zillow report or whatever, that's not your assessed value. It's much lower than that typically. The average homeowner at the average assessed value and the average homeowner under this levy would pay an additional $220 per year, about $18. And it would generate in the first year, next fiscal year, 14 million, and over the 5 years, it would generate $76.3 million. David was speaking to this, and I want to make the point very clear that the council's direction when they referred this forward to go to the May 20th ballot was very adamant that this levy money, if this passes, that the funds will go into a separate account. It will be audited separately above and beyond the city's normal budget audits. It will be accounted for in its own fund, and it will be basically separated from the general fund. Right? So what that does, you can go ahead, Bridget. I think that might be.
Could I make a comment?
Please
here?
do.
When I read this, because she sent this to us, and I saw the 220 a year and I thought, you know, there's a lot of people that I go, $200 a year. But when you put it down to $18 a month, you know, if we could change that to less than $20 a month, I don't think it would be quite so unpleasant for the voters to look at.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I have a second, kind of goes similarly to that. Do we have any sort of list of like the value that they're getting for that money in financial terms? So like services, like you can come to the library and rent a kayak, and if you bought a kayak, that would be $400, right? So right there, you save the money that you would have spent. Because for some people, like the 220 might be low, for others, it might be a little higher. So, you know, if that's the average, I think we have to find an average equivalent of money that they're saving by passing this levy.
Yeah, you know, that 220, that could be some kid not going to go, getting to go to camp, so. But if you just have it on a monthly thing, you know, it's not quite so bad. And I'm just thinking about the families, you know, I just think we have to try to make it not so distasteful, you know, asking for money is always distasteful.
May I just remind the group here that these are great ideas. The city's job at this point is to call balls and strikes, so they can't really kind of give a position one way or the other. That's our group,
Yeah.
and so that's something we're considering to do,
Okay,
is to kind of put a kind of a more fix on it.
okay.
Scott, can I ask a
Please.
question about? I don't think it's gonna pass, but the payment in lieu of taxes idea for the Marble Palace. Has there been discussion about? This is gonna be set aside for just library, and library will have no more general fund? Or will library still have general fund?
It will not. It will be separated
It will
in
be
its own fund.
completely separate, so that payment in lieu would just be for your general fund.
And so I'll say this, that I won't speak, I can speak to what I know the position of our current city council is, but future city councils, there is nothing legally that precludes the city from saying, we want to give the city library an extra 500,000 a year or something.
Gotcha. It would be, the council would decide how
it would have to be, you know, kind of a specifically directed thing, yeah. And that's, glad you brought that up too, you know, the levy is one piece of the city's kind of funding solution, and we have the energy of some community groups that wanted to come together and say, let's go do this, and the council heard that very loudly and clearly, and kudos to all of you and other groups and you know, our coalition that's working hard to go out and actually campaign for this. If not for that, we wouldn't be here today talking about this levy. It really was a grassroots effort, and it was great to be part of that and see what happened there. It really truly convinced the council to go do this. This is one part of the solution, and there are others like looking to the state to help pay for the city services that they utilize and don't pay taxes for. I will say there's more momentum it has more traction now than it has, I think, in a long time. And we'll see. I'm not predicting
It's happened
anything.
occasionally.
You know, there is a bill that is working its way through. It's being supported by most of our local representatives, legislators, but we'll see what happens. But that's one part of it. And then, you know, the council's looking at other options as well. Let's go to the next slide. So again, what the levy does is provides stable funding for the community services, which we don't have in every budget cycle. We're up against the needs of all of the general funds, and again, the public safety is the big one there. And what is really great about this is that because it would take the funding of these services out of the general fund, that means that then there's more capacity freed up in the general fund to fund all the other things, including public safety. So in this kind of roundabout way, this levy also helps our public safety needs. It helps the needs of the whole city. And that actually goes back a little bit to the conversation earlier about why are we doing a levy for all the different services. And again, David did I think a great job of giving context to that, but I'll just add to that I think you said this, David, that I think without the fact that it was a conglomerate, a coalition of these services and the groups that came together to support them, I don't think the council was going to have the political will to go forward. And here's part of the issue is the library's component of this. If we just went out to fund the library piece, we'd still have this gap to fund Parks and Rec, Center 50, and all the other things, including public safety, and we'd be still way behind. So it was almost like, yeah, we could go out and just try to secure some funding for the library, but we still have these other problems to solve. So this opportunity really came together to kind of solve those things collectively. And we have a lot of crossover of, you know, a lot of synergy between those things and what they do. These are really just quality of life issues for the community. They provide livability and, you know, and health and wellness and all the different things. So what we're hoping is that people that don't use the library, but use parks, or vice versa, that use parks but don't use library, will understand the value still of all of these things. You know, even though I don't use them, they're great for the community. I don't want to live in a place that doesn't have libraries, parks, and senior centers. And I think that's the idea, is that a lot of people hopefully get on board.
It's pretty classic legislative, something for everyone to love and hate.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, to the people who say, I don't want to do the parks.
Yeah.
So you, okay, well, that you don't like that part.
Yeah.
But there's other parts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. So I'm just about to the end here, but a couple other quick points. So talked about a lot of this already. Why this matters now is the need of the budget challenge. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's hard to speak to this right now because we can't tell you exactly what the reduction proposal will be. But in a very short amount of time, in just about 3 or 4 weeks, it will be very public what the reductions are going to look like. And I can tell you they're going to be substantial, including to our library services. So it solves that need. The longer term is interesting. So the levy is a 5-year solution. The good part about that is it's an immediate resolution to stabilizing our funding. It doesn't give us everything in the world. It doesn't get our library all the way back to, you know, its very best of times, but it does buy us some restoration of hours. But it does stabilize this. It keeps us from going backwards and it helps that tremendously. But the long term is, what about at the end of that levy if it passes? And that's I think a conversation that will be happening over the next few years. Is it stabilizes, it lets the city collectively kind of catch our breath and say, okay, we know these are secured services for now. But what do we want to plan for going forward? You could go back and ask for a renewal of a levy. Oftentimes when levies are implemented, if you do a good job and show the value, perhaps the community says, we'll support that again. But there might be other longer term solutions. A library district, for example, might be something, some other funding mechanism. So it's going to lead to those kinds of conversations.
Could you explain to me how a library district works?
Not in a short, not in a short time. Yeah, I could, but I'll tell you
You need
this.
like a couple hours.
Yeah, I think we could do that like as a whole separate thing. I have some background in districts, but I can tell you that it is the best, in my opinion, it is the best, most stable funding source for a service, whether it's a library or a Parks and Rec district or whatever it is, because it's a permanent tax rate. It becomes a permanent tax rate. The flip side of that is it is a very big lift to create a district. There's a lot of complex governmental stuff and.
And if you create a new district, it takes away, it
Yeah.
compresses what other districts can have.
There's all
So
these
it's
issues of,
like game of chess.
yeah.
Oh,
that's
oh,
correct.
okay. Huh.
There's the figuring out the boundaries and if there are other jurisdictions like other cities or the county involved, you have to get their buy-in and you have to do a lot of different things. It's a complex mechanism, but once it's created and if it was supported, I think it's the most stable funding source.
And wouldn't in theory, just to follow up what you're saying, my understanding is it could also create this would be a separate municipal service. So it'd almost be outside of the current system,
Yeah.
okay, the library district. And I should tell you that we had a presentation from the Library Association 4 months ago.
It was from the state library
State
and they
library.
talked about districting, which I
Yeah,
can share up.
Yeah, if you got that information, I think it's really helpful. It's really
Okay.
Great questions. I think, can you go ahead one more? Oh, this is just to show very quickly, and you can't really read this very well on the screen. This is the 5-year forecast of the general fund, and the bottom row, the arrows pointing downward are the deficit. These are in millions of dollars. So this is even with a levy. Without the levy, those numbers are far worse, and that's the really bad version of it. But this is actually with the levy to show how much of a budget challenge the city still has, and to be fully transparent. What we want to make sure is clear is the levy doesn't solve the whole budget issue. It gets us secured funding for these services for the next 5 years, but we still have other issues to solve. So that's where we're thinking about working with the state or other mechanisms. So yeah, it's a very big challenge that the city's got in front of it, but at least, and I think the perspective here is, I know I'm preaching to the choir, at least we pull the library, the other services out and say, we're gonna stabilize these, even though this is what the city is dealing with. So there's not gonna be any extra money to go around to throw to the library or other services for the next few years, but we would at least create this thing where.
And just to add to this, to kind of pull behind the screen a little bit, I mean, we had to wrestle with issues of who was gonna get this funding, and as well as how much we could ask the voters for and what they were comfortable with. And the polling that was done was not very positive. So we kind of as a group locked the door and said, what can we live with? And we felt to sell this to the voters, we had to give them $100. So it's not giving everything we want to luckily. But
Sorry.
but we think it is a good starting point, and we'll get everybody a little bit of what they wanted. So that was part of the issue that we had to weigh out, is what we felt the voters would pass.
Also, dude, you can go to the last slide. So just thanks for the time today. You know, what this levy represents is really an effort among a whole bunch of different groups and everybody kind of pulling in the same direction. So I just want to say on behalf of the city, thank you for your support as a library advisory board. And I know some of you are involved in other pieces of, you know, whether it's Friends or the foundation or the coalition that's working or other things. Thanks for your service to the city as well as specifically to the library. We wouldn't be where we're at going forward if not for your support and the other groups. And also, thank you to the Library Advisory Board for the support of the election costs. That was a very, very big thing. It actually kind of helped get the council, you know, over that last hurdle, if you will, because there was still this concern about, even though This election is not very expensive for the city. It's about 35,000 plus there's some money in there for some communication pieces coming from the city. But it was more the principle of, we don't want to spend money to go ask for money. There was a challenge in the past recent history of the payroll tax where we spent quite a bit on the election, and that still was an issue that we were, that the council was grappling with. So when the library board came forward and said, we'll help cover those costs, the council, I think that was the last little piece that the council needed to get to move forward, and they've moved forward collectively. I also will mention the city is seeking the endorsement or support of other entities, and we've already received a number. I think Jim Shepke was talking about the school board last night, basically endorsed this levy. We've been out to community groups like the chamber and the home builders, and we're asking for their endorsement. We're still waiting on those answers. Our unions, our city unions have all endorsed this. So AFSCME, which is our library group, and as well as that's our general city union. Police and fire unions have both endorsed this, which is big, and they're putting money behind it as well. It's going to the coalition.
And if I could just say, just closing up, I will be a little more forceful than Scott. This would have not gotten on the ballot if we had not put money in it. And it was a difficult decision for all of us, because this is money that we use for library services and it's from our donors. But our willingness to put money on the table, say that we would pay for this, as well as, do some of the, as well as having the advocacy group that took, it helped, I think, make this a 9-0 vote. And if it had not been a 9-0 vote, we would not have moved forward. We were pretty adamant, I will tell you, that we said, we'd be willing to do whatever was necessary to make this work, but it had to be unanimous, of course. And since it was unanimous, we said we would do it. So thank you, Scott, and thank you for your advice on this. But I think that, to me, was the key thing. And I heard that from a number of members of city council, that was the only way that they would have voted for this.
Yeah. There's probably lots more I could say, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. I've already taken a good portion of that, and I get to go off to another meeting tonight at Neighborhood. There's a few of us that are on the meeting tour with regard to the levy, and we have to get out and do this as much as we can before we hit. There's a magic deadline of, it's actually March 18th now, when the city finalizes its filing with the elections office, that we cannot be in any kind of position of advocacy, and that's when the PAC coalition group gets to really be the champions of that. But we're hitting the circuit, so I really appreciate your time, but I just appreciate your support, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have them before I
Mind
go.
up the date again, that the budget committee meeting,
April 16th.
16th.
That'll be the first.
I wrote down April, but nothing else.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the draft budget, the proposed budget, will be released probably close to a week before that.
Okay.
And there's a QR
Oh,
code.
thank you. So there's information on the city's website, and there's QR code. I'm leaving a few handouts behind that are 1-page quick info summaries of the levy in both English and Spanish language. And we have those, we'll provide, if any of you have those for, you're going to some organization or group, or you just want to give those to your friends or whatever, we can make more copies of those. So I'm leaving some of those on the counter, but we can provide you more, and we can send those to you electronically. So yeah, that has all the information. The city's website has a good Q&A on it, and kind of goes a little bit further with some of what I've given you at a very high level.
Right.
Great, thank you very much,
I'm gonna go to the
Scott,
next
for your time.
meeting and talk more about the levy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you for
your
your
time.
time. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions before we?
I do. Can we get a vice chair? Or temporarily till you come back, that way I'm not doing this alone.
Sure.
I think we have to open it.
Reminder, yeah, so
Yeah.
if you want to do a nomination for vice chair, so you would announce for nominations, and so somebody can do it now, but at the next meeting.
Yeah.
The nomination will close, and then you can vote.
Okay. And that's fine. I would like to not be alone.
So is there a motion to have a vice chair?
Yeah, I make the
nomination?
motion. that we have a vice chair.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Everyone seconded? All those in favor? Aye, great. We'll have that, will happen at next month's
Okay.
meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks
I,
for
oh,
all.
sorry, make a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
David, I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Oh, excellent.
I know what you spend effort takes. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. It is now 6:10. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Bye, Matt.
Well,
You'll be coming back tonight, right?
I'm hoping it'll be up to the mayor's side.
It's like